think the answer to that question, is complex. But first and foremost, it's important to recognize that I don't feel we're anywhere near to where we should be as it relates to the issue of inclusion in the education environment. There is no question that there are great strides that have been made. Any study you look at, there are more and more kids being included. Kids who are included or educated predominantly in general education settings, if they get what they need, do better than similar kids in segregated settings. We've known that for quite a while, in relationship to completing school, getting work, going on to higher education. And so many more kids are getting those types of programs. There's a big difference between poor kids, low-income kids, and more affluent kids on this dimension, is that there is a big disability achievement gap that corresponds roughly to poverty and race. And I think we need to be focusing much more attention on that issue. But overall, the trends are positive as it relates to this issue. And I do think that a major factor in these positive trends has been disability civil rights legislation. I think Section 504, the IDEA, and I think in some important ways the Americans with Disabilities Act all together have made a difference, that have emphasized, all three acts have emphasized the importance of people with disabilities being integrated into society in all realms of society, not just education. And I think those have been important. I think there's also been cultural changes that have been important. I do think that more people with disabilities being out in acknowledging their disabilities, parents being positive about their children with disabilities from an early age. I can remember when I first started out in the field of special education, you'd meet with many parents for whom disability was viewed as a great tragedy. You see many younger parents today of kids with disabilities, even at very young ages, who already have a very positive view of their child, and that's important. That's a cultural change. And those parents are seeking for their children to have all the opportunities of non-disabled kids, and they have law on their side. Sometimes they don't need it. Sometimes they're fortunate enough to go to a school district that embraces these kids, have medical providers who have the right knowledge about these kids and have positive attitudes towards these kids. It wasn't just the education system that had negative attitudes towards children with disabilities, also the medical system. It's not that these things don't need to change even more, but they have changed a lot. And I think they need to continue to change more. I think the biggest issue, and we still face this, and I see it all the time, is the notion that that people with disabilities are fundamentally different than people who don't have disabilities. That to some extent special education inadvertently reinforces that, that these kids get treated in some places very differently than non-disabled kids. And I think we have to reach a point where we recognize that, I know the topic of this is from stigma to strength, and I love that topic. But I would I'd even like to say I'd like to get to neutral. That way disability is viewed as something inherently negative. That it's neutral, that it's part of